The Korthak salvage market sprawled across 3 city blocks on Nexus Station 7. Merchants from 100 different worlds hawked their wares beneath the flickering neon signs. The air smelled of ozone and alien spices. Jake Morrison walked between the stalls with his hands shoved deep in his coverall pockets. His mechanic's uniform was stained with engine grease and hydraulic fluid. He had come to the market looking for spare parts for his repair shop. Business had been slow lately. Most aliens preferred to take their ships to their own kind. They didn't trust human mechanics. Jake understood why. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Most species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Jake stopped at a Vorthan merchant stall. The alien's 6 eyes blinked in sequence as it noticed him approaching. Vorthans looked like giant praying mantises made of crystal. This one's body caught the overhead lights and threw rainbow patterns across the ground. Human, the Vorthan clicked its mandibles. I have nothing for your primitive technology. Move along. Jake ignored the insult. He had heard worse. His eyes scanned the items on display. Most of it was junk. Burned-out power cores, cracked hull plating, stripped guide harnesses. But something in the back caught his attention. It sat half-hidden behind a pile of broken sensor arrays. The object was about the size of a basketball. Its surface was smooth and dark like polished obsidian. Strange symbols covered every inch of it. They seemed to shift and change when Jake wasn't looking directly at them. What's that? Jake pointed at the sphere. The Vorthan's antenna twitched with annoyance. Worthless scrap. Found it in the debris field near the Kalos Nebula. No species can identify it. No scanner can penetrate its shell. It does nothing. Takes up space. How much? You want to buy garbage? The Vorthan's eyes swirled with amusement. 50 credits. Take it and go. Jake pulled out his credit chip. 50 credits was almost nothing. He could afford to gamble on a mystery. The Vorthan transferred the sphere to him with obvious relief. It was heavier than Jake expected. The surface felt warm against his palms. Stupid human, the Vorthan muttered as Jake walked away. Wasting money on useless junk. Jake carried the sphere back to his repair shop. Morrison's Mechanical occupied a small bay in the station's industrial quarter. The rent was cheap because the location was terrible. Jake didn't mind. He liked the quiet. He set the sphere on his workbench and turned on the overhead lights. Under better illumination, he could see more details. The symbols weren't painted or etched. They seemed to be part of the material itself. Jake ran his fingers over them. They felt like letters, but from no alphabet he recognized. He tried his basic scanner first. The device beeped and displayed an error message. Jake wasn't surprised. The Vorthan had said scanners didn't work. He pulled out more sophisticated equipment. A molecular analyzer, a quantum field detector, a gravimetric sensor. Nothing could penetrate the sphere's surface. Jake sat back in his chair and studied the object. Most mechanics would have given up. But Jake had always been different. Where others saw problems, he saw puzzles. Where others saw junk, he saw potential. He remembered something his grandfather had told him. The old man had been a mechanic too, back on Earth. Sometimes, boy, you can't force a machine to tell you its secrets. You have to listen. You have to feel. Jake placed both hands on the sphere. He closed his eyes and let his mind wander. The workshop faded away. The hum of the station's life support systems grew distant. Jake focused on the warmth beneath his palms. And then he felt it, a vibration, so faint he almost missed it. Not mechanical, not electronic. Something else. Something that resonated with the beating of his own heart. Jake's eyes snapped open. He grabbed his stethoscope from his tool drawer. It was an antique, something he kept for sentimental reasons. His grandfather had used it to diagnose engine problems before modern sensors existed. He pressed the metal disc against the sphere's surface. The vibration became clearer. It had a rhythm. Loop-doop, loop-doop, like a heartbeat. But not quite. The pattern was more complex. There were sub-rhythms within the main beat. Layers upon layers of sound. Jake listened for 10 minutes. Then 20. The pattern never repeated exactly. It was like a song with infinite variations. He found himself holding his breath, afraid to miss a single note. A crazy idea formed in his mind. Jake pulled the stethoscope away and examined the symbols again. What if they weren't letters? What if they were musical notation? He had studied music as a child. His mother had insisted. Jake hadn't touched a piano in years, but he still remembered the basics. He sketched the symbols on a piece of paper, trying to capture their exact shapes. Then he noticed something. The symbols near the sphere's equator were different from those at the poles. They were longer, more complex, like whole notes compared to quarter notes. Jake grabbed a marker and started drawing lines on the sphere. He divided it into sections like bars of music. 3 hours later, his workbench was covered with papers. Jake had transcribed every symbol, noting its position and orientation. When he arranged them in order, they did look like sheet music. Alien sheet music, but music nonetheless. Jake didn't own any instruments, but he had something better. He pulled out his audio synthesizer. Mechanics used them to diagnose engine sounds. With some adjustment, it could produce almost any tone. He programmed the first few symbols into the machine. The notes that emerged were unlike anything he had heard before. They seemed to exist in frequencies that human music rarely explored. Some were so low they were felt more than heard. Others danced at the edge of ultrasonic. Jake played the entire sequence. It took 45 minutes. When the last note faded, the sphere began to glow. The light started faint, like a candle seen through fog. Then it grew brighter. The symbols on the surface blazed with white fire. Jake stepped back, shielding his eyes. The sphere rose off the workbench. It hovered 3 feet in the air, spinning slowly. A crack appeared along its equator. The two halves separated with a soft hiss. Inside was a core of pure light. It pulsed with the same rhythm Jake had heard through the stethoscope. The light coalesced into shapes. Holographic images filled the workshop. Jake saw star systems he didn't recognize. Massive structures that dwarfed planets. Ships that looked like they were made from condensed starlight. Then came the data. It flowed directly into Jake's mind. Not through his eyes or ears, but through some sense he didn't know he possessed. Knowledge filled him like water pouring into an empty glass. The sphere was a repository, a library, a message in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean. It had been created by a species called the Luminari. They had transcended physical existence millions of years ago. But before they left, they scattered these spheres throughout the galaxy. Each sphere contained the sum of their knowledge. Science that made current galactic technology look like stone tools. Art that could move souls across species barriers. Philosophy that answered questions no one had thought to ask. But the spheres were locked. They would only open for species that met certain criteria. Not technological advancement, not military might, not even intelligence as most races measured it. The Luminari valued something else, something rarer. They valued intuition, creativity, the ability to think beyond the boundaries of logic, the willingness to try the impossible, the courage to trust feelings over facts. In 50,000 years, no species had opened a sphere. The Vorthans had tried brute force. The Kalaki had applied mathematics. The Zinthran had used psychic powers. All had failed, but humans were different. They were young. They hadn't been shaped by millennia of galactic civilization. They still remembered how to dream. They still knew how to play. They still believed in magic, even if they called it by other names. Jake understood now why he had succeeded. It wasn't despite being human. It was because of it. The Luminari hadn't hidden their knowledge from primitive species. They had hidden it from civilizations that had forgotten how to wonder. The holographic images faded. The sphere's house closed. It settled back onto the workbench, looking exactly as it had before. But Jake knew everything had changed. He held in his mind blueprints for technologies that could reshape the galaxy. Medical knowledge that could end death itself. Energy sources that could power civilizations until the heat death of the universe. But more than that, he held a responsibility. The Luminari had trusted their legacy to whoever could open it. They believed that species would use it wisely. Jake couldn't betray that trust. He needed time to think, time to plan, time to decide how to reveal this gift to humanity and the galaxy. But first, he had a question. Jake placed his hand on the sphere again. This time, he knew what to feel for. The vibration welcomed him like an old friend. He sent a thought into the sphere. A simple question. Why? The answer came immediately, not in words but in understanding. The Luminari had watched younger races for eons before their ascension. They had seen great civilizations rise and fall. They had witnessed the same patterns repeat across millions of worlds. Species would develop technology. They would spread across the stars. They would build great empires, and then they would stagnate. Safety would become more important than discovery. Comfort would replace curiosity. The known would crowd out the unknown. These civilizations didn't die. They simply stopped living. They became museums of their own past glory. The Luminari had escaped this fate through transcendence. But they worried about those they left behind. So they created the spheres, not just as libraries, but as tests. Any species that could open one had proven they still possessed the spark of true life. Humans had that spark. They were messy. They were chaotic. They made mistakes. But they also made miracles. They looked at the impossible and asked why not. They faced the unknown with excitement rather than fear. The sphere pulsed once more, then went dormant. Jake knew it would open again when he was ready, when humanity was ready. He looked around his small workshop. Tomorrow, it would become the most important location in the galaxy. Scientists would come from every world to study the sphere. Historians would debate its significance. Politicians would argue over its implications. But tonight, it was just Jake and the gift of an ancient race. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey he kept for special occasions. Nothing had ever been more special than this. Jake poured himself a drink and raised the glass to the sphere. "Thank you," he said to the Luminari, wherever they were. "We won't let you down." The sphere seemed to pulse in response. Or maybe it was just Jake's imagination. He didn't care. Tomorrow would bring challenges he couldn't imagine. But tonight, he was the luckiest human in the galaxy. Jake sipped his whiskey and began a plan. The knowledge in his head was vast, but he could already see priorities. Medical technology first. No one should die from curable diseases. Then, energy. Clean, unlimited power for every world. After that, transportation. Make the galaxy smaller. Bring species together. But he would have to be careful. Too much, too fast, and it could destroy everything. The Galactic Council would be suspicious. Some species might see humanity as a threat. Jake needed allies. He needed to prove that humans could be trusted with this power. He thought about the Vorthan merchant. The alien had dismissed the sphere as worthless scrap. Tomorrow, Jake would return to the market. He would find that merchant and show him what he had missed. Not to gloat, but to teach. To demonstrate that every species had blind spots. That cooperation was better than competition. The workshop's chronometer showed 3 in the morning. Jake should sleep. Tomorrow would be the beginning of a new era. But he couldn't tear himself away from his sphere. He had so many questions, so many things to learn. He placed his hand on its surface one more time. The warmth was comforting now. Familiar. Jake closed his eyes and let the rhythm flow through him. Lubed up, lubed up. The heartbeat of an ancient civilization. The pulse of infinite possibility. When he finally opened his eyes, the first light of the station's artificial dawn was creeping through his windows. Jake stood and stretched. His back ached from sitting so long. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. But his spirit soared. He covered the sphere with a cloth, not to hide it, but to protect it. Soon, everyone would know what it was. But for a few more hours, it was a secret. His responsibility. His gift. Jake walked to his small apartment above the shop. He needed a shower, fresh clothes, food, all the mundane necessities of life. But even these simple acts felt different now. He was still human. Still Jake Morrison, mechanic from Earth. But he was also something more. A bridge between the past and the future. A keeper of impossible knowledge. As he climbed the stairs, Jake heard the market coming to life. Merchants opening their stalls. Customers beginning their daily routines. None of them knew that their universe had changed overnight. None of them suspected that in a dingy repair shop, a human had unlocked the greatest treasure in galactic history. Jake smiled. Let them have their ordinary morning. Soon enough, ordinary would be a thing of the past. The galaxy was about to discover what the Luminari had known all along. Humans were special, not because they were strong or smart or advanced, but because they still knew how to see magic in the mundane. They still knew how to find treasure in the trash. And sometimes that made all the difference in the universe. The news spread through Nexus Station 7 like wildfire. By noon, every communication channel buzzed with the same story. A human mechanic had unlocked an ancient artifact. The impossible had happened. Jake stood in his workshop, watching the crowd gather outside. Word had leaked when he contacted Dr. Sarah Chun, the station's human xenoarchaeologist. She had arrived within minutes, taken one look at the sphere, and immediately called the Galactic Council. Now representatives from every major species were converging on his repair shop. Security forces had cordoned off the area. Media drones hovered overhead. The quiet industrial quarter had become the center of the universe's attention. Sarah stood beside him, her face flushed with excitement. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked for the 10th time. "This changes everything. Everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations, about the development of technology, about our place in the galaxy." Jake nodded. The knowledge from the sphere still filled his mind. He understood better than anyone. But understanding and explaining were two different things. Ambassador Krex arrived first. The Vorthan diplomat's crystalline body clinked with each step. Unlike the merchant from the market, Krex moved with careful dignity. His 6 eyes focused on Jake with laser intensity. "Mr. Morrison," Krex said, his translator rendering the clicks and whistles into smooth English. "I am here on behalf of the Vorthan Collective. We must discuss the implications of your discovery." More ambassadors followed. The Kalaki representative floated in a sphere of water, her tentacles writing complex equations in the liquid. The Zenthran psychic hovered 3 feet off the ground, his mind pressing against Jake's mental barriers. The Draconi warrior stood at attention, her scales shifting color with barely contained emotion. Jake felt overwhelmed. He was a mechanic, not a diplomat. He fixed engines, not interstellar relations. But the sphere had chosen him. That meant something. "Please," Jake said, raising his hands. "I know you all have questions. So do I. But maybe we should start with a demonstration." He uncovered the sphere. The ambassadors leaned forward, their various sensory organs focused on the object. To them, it looked like nothing special. Just another piece of space debris. Jake had spent the morning preparing. He had transcribed the musical sequence onto a proper player. No more fumbling with the audio synthesizer. He pressed a button, and the workshop filled with the alien melody. The effect was immediate. The sphere began to glow. The symbols danced with light. It rose from the workbench, spinning in its mysterious rhythm. But this time was different. The sphere sensed the presence of other species. The holographic display expanded, showing different images to each ambassador. The Vorthan saw mathematical proofs that made their greatest theorems look like children's drawings. The Kalaki witnessed biological processes that could extend life indefinitely. The Zenthran glimpsed psychic techniques that dwarfed their current abilities. Each species saw what they could understand, what they were ready for. But only Jake saw everything. The display lasted 5 minutes. When it ended, the workshop was silent. The ambassadors stood frozen, processing what they had witnessed. Krex spoke first. "This is unprecedented. The Vorthan Collective has searched for such artifacts for 3,000 years. We have the most advanced scanning technology in the galaxy." "How did you—" "I listened," Jake said simply. "I felt. I played." The Zenthran's mental voice echoed in everyone's minds. "The human speaks truth. I sense no deception. But I also sense something else. The artifact has bonded with him. It will not open for us as it does for him." Jake nodded. The Luminari designed it that way. The spheres choose their keepers. But the knowledge is meant to be shared. All of it. With everyone. The Draconi warrior growled. "Shared? This is power beyond imagination. Why should humans control it? You have been in space for barely 50 years. We have been traveling the stars for millennia. Maybe that's why," Sarah said, stepping forward. "Maybe the Luminari knew that whoever found their gift needed fresh eyes, needed to see possibilities not limitations. The debate that followed was intense. Some species argued for placing the sphere under collective control. Others wanted to study it in their own laboratories. A few suggested that humanity was too young to handle such responsibility. Jake let them argue. He understood their fear. The knowledge in the sphere could destabilize the entire galactic order. Technologies that had taken species thousands of years to develop were suddenly obsolete. Power structures built on technological superiority would crumble. But he also understood the Luminari's wisdom. This wasn't about power. It was about growth, about pushing beyond comfortable boundaries, about becoming more than what they were. "Stop," Jake said finally. His voice was quiet, but it carried authority he didn't know he possessed. "You're thinking about this wrong. The sphere isn't a weapon. It's not a prize. It's a teacher." He walked to the center of the group. The Luminari didn't leave their knowledge for one species to hoard. They left it for all of us. But they knew that dumping advanced technology on unprepared civilizations would be disaster. So they created a system. Jake touched the sphere. It pulsed in response. "This will only share what each species is ready to understand. The Vorthan see mathematics because that's your strength. The Kalaki see biology because that's your focus. But there's so much more. Art, philosophy, music, stories. What do you propose?" Krex asked. "A new kind of institution," Jake said. "Not controlled by any one species. Not hidden in some secret laboratory. Open, accessible. A place where every race can come to learn. Where we can work together to understand what the Luminari left us." The room erupted in discussion again. But this time it was different. Instead of arguing about control, they were debating implementation. Where would such an institution be located? How would it be funded? Who would oversee it? Jake smiled. This was progress. Over the following days, the workshop became a makeshift embassy. Representatives from minor species arrived, not wanting to be left out. Scientists pleaded for access. Religious leaders proclaimed various interpretations of the sphere's significance. Through it all, Jake continued his work. Not on the sphere that had become bigger than him, but on his regular repairs. Ships still needed fixing. Engines still needed tuning. The galaxy might be changing, but life went on. One afternoon, while Jake was elbow-deep in a Kalaki transport's propulsion system, he heard familiar clicking. The Vorthan merchant from a market stood in his doorway. "You," the merchant said. "The human who bought my worthless scrap." Jake wiped his hands on a rag. "It wasn't worthless. You just didn't know what you had." The merchant's eyes swirled with what Jake had learned was embarrassment. "I've been a salvage dealer for 60 years. I pride myself on recognizing value. But I saw nothing, felt nothing." "Don't feel bad," Jake said. "I almost walked past it too. Sometimes the greatest treasures look like junk." The merchant clicked thoughtfully. "My name is Vex. I came to apologize. And to ask a question. Could you teach me? Not the advanced knowledge. I know the sphere will not open for me as it does for you. But could you teach me to see as you see? To feel as you feel?" Jake was surprised. Of all the reactions he had expected, humility from a Vorthan wasn't one of them. Their species was notorious for their pride in their analytical abilities. "I'm not sure I can teach it," Jake admitted. "It's not really a skill. It's more like a way of being. Humans call it intuition. But sure, I'll try." Vex became a regular visitor. He would sit in the corner while Jake worked, observing, occasionally asking questions. Slowly, Jake realized he was learning as much from Vex as the alien was from him. The Vorthan showed him how to see patterns in chaos, how to analyze without losing wonder, how to combine logic and intuition into something greater than either alone. Other species noticed. Soon, Jake's workshop hosted an informal school. The Zinthran taught meditation techniques that helped Jake better interface with the sphere. The Draconi demonstrated focus exercises that sharpened his ability to absorb the vast knowledge. The Kalaki shared biological adaptations that allowed for better processing of multiple data streams. It wasn't what any of them had expected. Instead of one species controlling the sphere's knowledge, they were creating something new. A fusion of perspectives. A galactic consciousness that was more than the sum of its parts. The formal institution Jake had proposed was taking shape too. The Galactic Council had approved the creation of the Luminary Institute. It would be built on a neutral station, accessible to all species. Jake would serve as the primary interface with the sphere, but decisions would be made collectively. Sarah had been appointed as humanity's representative to the Institute. She spent her days cataloging the knowledge Jake extracted from the sphere, translating it into forms other species could understand. "You know what amazes me most?" she said one evening. They were sharing a meal in Jake's apartment, taking a break from the chaos below. "It's not the technology. It's not even the science. It's the art." Jake nodded. The Luminary's artistic knowledge was profound. They had developed forms of expression that touched souls across species barriers. Music that could make a Vorthan cry. Paintings that could inspire a Draconi to poetry. Sculptures that revealed universal truths. "They understood something we're just beginning to grasp," Sarah continued. "Technology can change how we live, but art changes who we are." A soft chime interrupted their conversation. Jake checked his communicator. Another ship had arrived. Another species wanting to witness the sphere. He sighed. "Go," Sarah said, smiling. "You're the most important human in the galaxy now. Possibly the most important being, period." "I'm still just a mechanic," Jake protested. "No," Sarah said seriously. "You're not. You're what the Luminari were looking for. A bridge. Someone who can stand between the known and unknown without fear. Someone who can help us all become more than we are." Jake returned to the workshop. The new arrivals were from a species he didn't recognize. They were small, barely 3 feet tall, with bodies that seemed to be made of living shadow. Their ambassador stepped forward. "We are the Umbri," she said, her voice like whispered silk. "We have traveled from the edge of the galaxy. Our people have a legend, a story passed down for 1,000,000 years. It speaks of teachers who left gifts for those who could hear the universe sing. We believe you have found such a gift." Jake activated the sphere's display. As always, it showed each viewer what they needed to see. But the Umbri's reaction was different. They didn't gasp or freeze. They began to dance. Their shadow forms flowed and shifted, creating patterns that matched the sphere's rhythm. It was beautiful and alien and somehow perfect. Jake realized they were communicating with the sphere in their own way. Not through music or mathematics or psychic power, but through movement itself. When the display ended, the Umbri ambassador bowed deeply. The legend was true, and it says something else. It says the gifts were not left for those who are ready, but for those who can help others become ready. You, human Jake Morrison, are such a one. That night, Jake lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. In a few short days, his life had changed beyond recognition. He had gone from struggling mechanic to the keeper of the galaxy's greatest treasure. But the Umbri's word stuck with him. The sphere wasn't just about knowledge. It was about transformation, about helping every species reach their potential. The Luminari hadn't just left their technology. They had left a challenge, a call to growth. Jake thought about humanity's role in this. They were young compared to other species. They lacked the Vorthan's analytical power, the Zenthran's psychic abilities, the Draconis' physical strength. But they had something else, something the Luminari had recognized. They had the ability to see connections, to find common ground between differences, to imagine the impossible and then make it real, not through superiority, but through cooperation, not by being the best, but by helping everyone be better. The sphere pulsed in the workshop below. Jake could feel it even from his apartment. It was waiting, patient, eternal, ready to share its secrets with those who could hear its song. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Institute would face political pressures. Some species would try to gain advantage. Others would fear the changes coming. But Jake wasn't worried. He had felt the Luminari's hope through the sphere. They hadn't ascended because they had given up on physical existence. They had ascended because they had completed their purpose. They had learned all they could learn in material form. But they hadn't forgotten those they left behind. The spheres were their legacy, their gift to younger races, a ladder to help others climb to heights they couldn't imagine. Jake smiled in the darkness. He was just one human, one mechanic who had gotten lucky in a salvage market. But he was also part of something larger now, something that stretched across space and time. something that connected every thinking being in the galaxy. The sound of engines hummed through the station's hull, ships coming and going, lives intersecting, stories beginning and ending. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and thanks to a species that had transcended millions of years ago, it was about to become even more wonderful. Jake closed his eyes and let sleep take him. In his dreams, he danced with the Umbri. He calculated with the Vorthons. He meditated with the Zenthorans. He was human, but he was also more. He was what the Luminari had hoped to find. He was ready to help others become ready. And that, more than all the knowledge in the sphere, was the real gift. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison opened the Luminari sphere. The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Institute, bearing the ancient race's name, now occupied an entire station, built in record time through unprecedented cooperation between species. Jake stood in the Institute's central chamber, watching students from a dozen worlds work together. A young Vorthon and an elderly human collaborated on equations that would revolutionize faster-than-light travel. A group of Kalaki and Draconi explored biological enhancements that could benefit all species. The Umbri led movement classes that helped other races understand the physical language of the universe. But not everything was harmonious. Jake could feel the tension building in certain quarters. The knowledge from the sphere threatened established orders. Some governments feared losing control. Some corporations saw their monopolies crumbling. Some individuals simply couldn't accept that humans, young, chaotic humans, held the key to such power. Keeper Morrison, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Ambassador Krex approached, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. The council wishes to speak with you. There have been developments. Jake followed Krex to the council chambers. Representatives from every major species sat in a circle, their faces, or what passed for faces, grave. At the center of their attention was a hologram showing a fleet of ships, military vessels, heavily armed, and moving in formation. The hegemony of sorrow, said the Draconi counselor, her scales dark with anger. They have rejected the Institute. They claim the sphere's knowledge is a corruption, a test from their gods to see who will resist temptation. Jake knew of the hegemony. They were a coalition of species that value tradition above progress. They had fought against every major change in galactic history. Now, they were coming for the Institute. How long until they arrive? Jake asked. 3 days, Krex answered. Their leader, Prophet Vextor, has declared a holy war. He says the sphere must be destroyed to preserve the natural order. Sarah entered the chamber, her face flushed from running. Jake, we have another problem. Someone's been trying to hack into the sphere remotely. Very sophisticated attempts. If I hadn't upgraded our security with Luminari encryption methods, they might have succeeded. The council erupted in discussion. Some wanted to move the sphere to a more defensible location. Others suggested negotiating with the hegemony. A few proposed preemptive strikes. Jake raised his hand for silence. May I suggest something different? The room quieted. Over the past months, Jake had earned their respect. He wasn't just the sphere's keeper. He had become a voice of wisdom in his own right. The Luminari faced this same challenge, Jake said. Different species, different time, but the same fear of change. They could have used their power to force compliance. Instead, they chose transcendence. They removed themselves from the equation. You suggest we abandon the sphere? The Zenthran counselor's mental voice carried disbelief. No, Jake said. I suggest we share it. Completely. Openly. Without reservation. He walked to the center of the circle. We've been treating the sphere like a treasure to be guarded. But it's not. It's meant to be a seed. And seeds need to be scattered to grow. Jake pulled out a small device. Over the past weeks, he had been working on something in secret. Using Luminari knowledge combined with human intuition and alien perspectives, he had created something new. This is a resonance broadcaster, he explained. It can transmit the sphere's opening frequency across subspace. Anyone, anywhere in the galaxy, who has the ability to hear it, will be able to access the knowledge. The council sat in stunned silence. You want to give everyone access? Krex's eyes swirled with alarm. The chaos will be temporary, Jake interrupted. Yes, some will use the knowledge for selfish purposes. But most won't. Most beings given the chance want to grow, want to learn, want to be better. This is madness, the Draconi counselor growled. The hegemony will have no reason to attack, Jake said. You can't destroy knowledge that exists in a million minds. You can't suppress truth that everyone can access. The only way to fight the spread of light is to become light yourself. Sarah stepped forward. Jake's right. We've analyzed the sphere's selection criteria. It doesn't just look for intelligence or creativity. It looks for readiness to use knowledge wisely. By broadcasting the frequency, we're not giving everyone all the knowledge at once. We're giving them the chance to prove they're ready. The debate raged for hours. Jake answered every objection, countered every fear. He drew on the wisdom the sphere had shared, but, more importantly, he drew on his understanding of people. All people, regardless of species. Finally, a vote was called. It was closer than Jake had hoped, but the measure passed. The broadcast would begin in 12 hours, giving time for preparations and warnings. News of the decision spread quickly. Some celebrated, others panicked. The hegemony's fleet accelerated, hoping to arrive before the broadcast. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. Threats, pleas, thanks, and curses in equal measure. Jake spent the night in the sphere chamber, making final adjustments to the broadcaster. Vex, his Vorthan friend from the market, worked beside him. Are you certain about this? Vex asked. Once started, it cannot be undone. Nothing important can be undone, Jake replied. That's what makes it important. The Luminari knew that. They couldn't take back their transcendence. We can't take back opening the sphere. The hegemony can't take back their fear. All we can do is move forward. Morning came too quickly. The Institute filled with beings wanting to witness history. Some came to support, others to observe, a few to protest. Security was tight, but Jake had insisted the event be open to all. He stood before the sphere, the broadcaster in his hands. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. Once activated, the galaxy would change forever. Knowledge that had been hidden for millions of years would be available to anyone ready to receive it. Before we begin, Jake said, his voice carried throughout the Institute by countless recording devices, I want to say something. To the hegemony, who fear this change, I understand. Change is terrifying, but stagnation is death. The Luminari didn't leave this knowledge to destroy us. They left it to save us from ourselves. To those who would use this knowledge for harm, it won't work the way you think. The sphere's wisdom comes with understanding. The more you learn, the more you'll see how connected we all are. How hurting others hurts yourself. How lifting others lifts you. And to those ready to grow, welcome. Welcome to a larger universe. Welcome to possibilities you've never imagined. Welcome to becoming more than you are. Jake activated the broadcaster. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the sphere began to pulse. Not with light, but with something deeper. A resonance that touched the quantum foam itself. The pulse spread outward at the speed of thought. It passed through the Institute's walls, through the ships hovering nearby, through space itself. Within seconds, it had reached the nearest star systems. Within minutes, it would touch every corner of the galaxy. And then, the responses began. On a farming world at the edge of known space, a young Kalaki touched her family's ancient meditation stone and gasped as it revealed itself to be a dormant sphere. In the heart of a Vorthan city, a discarded artifact in a museum suddenly blazed with life. Deep in a Draconi temple, a relic thought to be purely ceremonial began to sing. The spheres had been everywhere all along, waiting, hidden in plain sight, dismissed as curiosities, religious artifacts, or worthless scrap. Now they awakened, each one singing the same song Jake had discovered, each one opening for those ready to listen. But it wasn't just spheres. Some beings found the knowledge written in the patterns of stellar formations. Others discovered it encoded in their own DNA, placed there millions of years ago. The Umbri realized their ancient dances had always been instructions, waiting for the key to unlock their meaning. The hegemony fleet arrived to find a transformed galaxy. Their leader, Prophet Vextor, demanded to board the Institute. Jake met him at the airlock. Vextor was a Skarathi, a species that looked like massive armored centipedes. His compound eyes burned with righteous fury. "You have doomed us all," he hissed. "The natural order is change," Jake interrupted. "Growth, evolution. The only unnatural thing is trying to stop it. You're a child," Vextor spat. "Your species has existed for a blink of an eye. What wisdom could you possibly—" He stopped mid-sentence. His antennae twitched. Like every being in the galaxy, he could now hear the sphere's song. But, unlike many, he was fighting it, refusing to listen, clinging to his fears. "It's okay," Jake said gently. "I was scared too. When I first opened the sphere, when I realized how much would change, I almost ran away. But fear is just change waiting to happen, growth waiting to begin." Vextor's compound eyes focused on Jake. "Why? Why did it choose your species? You're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the oldest or wisest. Why humans?" Jake thought for a moment. "Because we're still learning how to be. We haven't decided what we are yet. We still have room to grow. And maybe that's what the Luminari were looking for. Not perfection, just potential." The prophet stood silent for a long time. Around them, the galaxy continued to transform. Reports came in of new technologies being developed, diseases being cured, conflicts being resolved as species finally understood each other's perspectives. Finally, Vextor spoke. Show me what you see when you touch the sphere." Jake led him to the central chamber. The original sphere sat on a pedestal, still pulsing with its ancient rhythm. Jake placed his hand on its surface and nodded for Vextor to do the same. The prophet hesitated, then reached out with one of his manipulator arms. The moment he made contact, his entire body went rigid. Jake felt what Vextor experienced, the fear dissolving, the walls he had built around his mind crumbling. The realization that change wasn't destruction, it was life itself. The universe was not a museum to be preserved, but a garden to be cultivated. When Vextor pulled away, his compound eyes were wet with tears his species rarely shed. "I have been a fool," he whispered. "I fought to preserve death while thinking I defended life." "We all make mistakes," Jake said. "The question is, what do we do next?" Vextor straightened, his segmented body rising to its full height. "I must return to my fleet. Tell them what I have learned. Some will listen. Others—" He clicked his mandibles. "Change is never easy, but it is necessary." As the prophet left, Sarah approached Jake. "The council wants to know what's next. The galaxy is transforming faster than anyone imagined. Some are calling it a new golden age. Others are terrified. Everyone's looking to you for guidance." Jake laughed. "I'm still just a mechanic. I fix things. And right now, the galaxy doesn't need fixing. It needs growing. Let people find their own paths, make their own mistakes, discover their own truths." "But you're the sphere's keeper," Sarah protested. "No," Jake said, looking at the ancient artifact. "I was its opener, its translator, maybe its first student, but I'm not its keeper. No one is. The Luminari's knowledge belongs to everyone now, as it was always meant to." He walked to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Ships of every design filled space around the Institute. Some were leaving, carrying newfound knowledge back to their worlds. Others were arriving, bringing questions and discoveries to share. "You know what the most amazing thing is?" Jake said. "The spheres didn't contain all of the Luminari's knowledge. They contained just enough to get us started. The real wisdom comes from what we do with it, how we combine it with our own experiences, how we use it to understand each other." Over the following weeks, Jake watched the galaxy change, not into something the Luminari had planned, but into something new, something unique. Each species brought their own perspective to the ancient knowledge, creating innovations the Luminari had never imagined. The Vorthans developed mathematics that could model consciousness itself. The Kalaki created biological systems that blurred the line between life and technology. The Zintrans found ways to link minds across light years. The Draconi turned warfare into art, and art into peace. And humans? Humans did what they did best. They connected things. They found patterns others missed. They asked what if and why not, until the impossible became inevitable. Jake returned to his workshop on Nexus Station 7. The Institute ran itself now, guided by representatives from every species. The spheres continued to share their knowledge with those ready to receive it. The galaxy had moved beyond needing a single keeper. But people still needed mechanics. Ships still broke down. Engines still needed tuning. And Jake found peace in the familiar work. He was part of history now, but he was also still himself. Still the human who had seen potential in a piece of scrap. Vex visited often. The Vorthan had become a philosopher, combining analytical thought with intuitive leaps. "I've been thinking," Vex said one day. "The Luminari transcended, left physical existence behind. Do you think that's our destiny too?" Jake considered while adjusting a power coupling. "Maybe. Probably. But not yet. We got too much to learn here first. Too much to experience. Too many connections to make. And after?" Vex asked. "After, we'll leave something behind for the next ones. Maybe not spheres. Maybe something we can't even imagine yet. But something that says, we were here. We learned. We grew. And now it's your turn." They worked in comfortable silence. Two friends from different worlds, sharing the simple pleasure of fixing broken things. Outside, the galaxy spun on, full of species learning to be more than they were. And somewhere in the quantum foam, the Luminari watched and smiled. Their gift had been received. Their trust had been earned. The younger races were growing up. The sphere in Jake's workshop pulsed quietly, no longer the center of attention, but still present. Still ready to teach anyone who approached with an open heart and a willing mind. It had traveled through space for millions of years, dismissed as worthless scrap by countless beings, until a human mechanic had seen what no alien could. Not because humans were better, but because they were still becoming, still choosing who they wanted to be. And in a galaxy full of ancient wisdom and new possibilities that made all the difference. Jake finished his repair and wiped his hands clean. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, new connections between species that had once been strangers. But tonight he was content to be what he had always been, a mechanic who fixed broken things, and sometimes, when the universe needed it, helped fix broken perspectives too. The stars shone through his workshop window, each one now a doorway to infinite possibility. The galaxy had been transformed by knowledge hidden in plain sight, wisdom disguised as worthless junk. And at the center of it all was a simple truth the Luminari had understood. The greatest treasures are often dismissed as scrap, until someone with the right eyes comes along to see their true value. Jake smiled and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, there would be more fixing to do. There always was. But that was okay. Fixing things was what humans did best. That, and seeing magic where others saw only metal.